And now, our feature presentation.
Hey there, welcome back to No Flicks Given, the show where we don't give a flick.
Nope.
Still working on it.
Nope.
No?
We're getting
Is that
there.
not it?
It's getting closer. It's getting closer.
I keep on trying to make that one work for whatever reason. Anyway, my name's Peter. With me today is Connor.
Hello, Internet.
And Matt.
Yes. Hello. It's a trio for this episode.
Yeah, no Frank today.
Frank has been banished.
Frank is sitting this one out, which is all right, but it is another episode of Peter's Film School, the movies that I feel like I probably would have watched or classics that I have missed. And today's pick, as you can see by the title on your device, is Raging Bull, the 1980 movie by Martin Scorsese. So how excited are you guys to watch this?
I've seen Raging Bull.
It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I saw Raging Bull in college. I'm not looking forward to it.
So I should say, how do you guys feel about Scorsese in general?
He is very much hit or miss for me. There are some movies that really speak to me, like Bringing Out the Dead and even Gangs of New York, and then and even Departed. But then there are things that I am utterly uninterested, like The Irishman.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see if the high school me's interpretation of this movie has changed or been reaffirmed upon a rewatch.
I will say before watching this is one of the movies that feels like the Film Bro like top movie of all time.
Oh, I can't wait to start into that conversation.
It's definitely one of them. Definitely one of them.
It feels like it's up there. It feels like, if there was a Chad of the movie bros, this would be the one that he would tout. So I've never seen it before.
Yeah.
I have the only thing I know about it. It's a boxing movie. It's got De Niro. It's got Pesci. I think it's their first movie together.
Yeah, maybe.
And
it is.
And it's fairly early on in Scorsese's career.
Yeah.
And that's really the only thing that I know about it. So
yeah.
I'm excited to get into it, and let's put it on.
The Bronx Bull, the Raging Bull. Let's hear for the great Jake LaMotta, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm the best. And I can take him more than anybody.
You're dead. You're married. Leave the young girls for me.
There's no way I'm going down. I don't go down for nobody.
What is it with him? Why does he have to make it so hard on himself?
If you beat Sugar Ray, you'll get a shot at the title. You feel that way?
There's no one else around who wants to fight me. They're all afraid.
He's done a lot of bad things, Joey. Maybe it's coming back to him.
All right, and we're back. I don't know that's what I was expecting.
Huh.
What were you expecting, Peter?
Yeah.
So my first perspective, my first sort of thought about this is a movie about boxing that is inherently disinterested in boxing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
This movie is sort of classified as one of like the greatest sports movies of all time, and it is not interested in the sport at all.
Disagree,
and I
yeah.
did use.
I was going to say disagree.
It is in so many ways not about the sport at all.
Exactly. Well, and it's clearly meant to be more of a biopic about Jake LaMotta, who was a real person. This movie is based on his autobiography, and in fact, LaMotta met De Niro and gave him a copy of his book personally and signed it to De Niro as like the only guy who could ever like portray my crazy life. And
yeah,
then
actually, when we get into the history of it, Robert De Niro has so much more to do with this movie being made than just being in it.
Yeah.
And LaMotta was kind of his boxing coach for a little bit too.
He was his boxing coach. In fact, to get ready for this movie, De Niro got into 3 sanctioned boxing matches and won 2. And LaMotta thought that he could be a legitimate middleweight boxer.
Holy shit, I did not know that.
Not only did he think he could be a legitimate middleweight boxer, he thought he could be a great middleweight boxer.
Yes. Yeah, he said he was like one of the top 20 greatest middleweight boxers he's ever seen or something like that. Let's kind of get into what the movie is about. So if you're not familiar with Raging Bull, I guess, does anyone want to take a stab at a 1-sentence challenge?
I mean, it's the life and times of Jake LaMotta. Like that's pretty much it. It feels very much like the longer version of a Linklater film, where instead of it's just being a slice of life in a given day or a night or whatever, it's a slice of his life from kind of reaching the peak of his career to where he landed off in the 60s.
About an incredibly unsympathetic dude, too.
Yeah.
At the risk of editorializing, my 1-sentence challenge would be asshole repeatedly makes bad decisions and ruins own life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a story about abusers and the damage that they do to themselves and others.
Absolutely. And this is it. If there's one thing that I feel like is really consistent with a lot of the movies that are consistently lauded as like Scorsese's best, it's about bad people getting what they deserve and people who love those movies taking exactly the wrong message from them.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think this is one of those movies.
Yeah. When you were debating off mic between Taxi Driver and this movie, there was some conversation about like the political angle of Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
And and like that's the exact example is people thinking that Travis Bickle is some kind of hero.
Yeah.
Which is why also I was more inclined to watch this one right now than Taxi Driver, just by virtue of how much more politically infused that one is. And I just didn't have the bandwidth to deal with that right now.
Yeah.
This movie did win 2 Academy Awards for editing and Best Actor for De Niro, who I think De Niro deserves it. I mean, the amount of work that De Niro does in this movie is astounding.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
He's an uncredited writer.
Yeah.
On it. Like he and Scorsese like went out to like an island somewhere and wrote the first series of drafts and then finalized it too. Like Scorsese worked with Paul Schrader, who had written Taxi Driver, for like the middle section where like the movie really took shape, but but De Niro really helped polish it to what the movie winds up being.
Yeah.
The legend is that Scorsese ODs on cocaine. And De Niro visits him every day in the hospital with this book to be like, come on, this is the thing that's going to get us back. This is going to help keep you clean. We're going to throw you into this work. And then they go down to St. Martin to like help keep Scorsese like dry and strung out, or not strung out, just dry. And he basically talks to him, and Scorsese had no interest in boxing at all.
No.
Scorsese is not interested in sports. It's really evident in the film. He's not interested in boxing. He says he's not interested in boxing, but he was able to make enough parallels with sort of the drama and the theater of boxing with how a life could be played out. And that all being said, I think from a photography perspective, they do some really interesting things with how they shoot a lot of the matches.
Oh God, yes. That to me is the best part of the film, is the technical aptitude with which they are actually shooting these matches and how visceral they get with them. All of that is great. I think really the thing that always takes me out of it is the people who are involved with the boxing, the inside baseball, so to speak, of the boxing match world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, jumping straight from his first match with, I forget who it's with.
Sugar Ray, isn't it?
He fights Sugar Ray like 6 times in this movie.
That's true.
Let's just say it was Sugar Ray.
Yeah.
Which the guy that plays Sugar Ray is great.
Yeah.
No, Jimmy Reeves.
Oh, okay.
He's fighting Jimmy Reeves, who I don't know who that is, but that's who he's fighting. And they go straight from the fight where he loses on a technicality to screaming at his wife about steak.
Yeah.
is I mean, like that like 2 minutes in either direction where it's like boxing, screaming at his wife is basically what the entire movie is going to be. And I mean, it's nice that they introduce us to that formula early.
It's kind of that rinse and repeat where he's lashing out at the people around him who are closest to him. For some reason and I wish that we got some sort of an explanation about why he's just paranoid that everyone around him is fucking him over constantly. That's the only thing that he actually trusts, is that he thinks his wife, both wives, he has a second wife later on in the movie. He thinks both of them are running around on him. He thinks they're, his brother is intentionally trying to screw him over and or sleep with his wife. He certainly doesn't trust the boxing commission. He doesn't trust the mobsters who are trying to prop him up, which is probably rightly so. He's so immediately self-destructive that you can already tell where the movie's going in like the first 5 minutes.
Yeah. No, it's a control thing with him.
Mm-hmm.
He wants, I mean, even like the way he like all of the fights with, not all the fights, but a majority of the fights with his wives starts with him giving them an order and them getting mad at him for ordering them around.
Yeah.
It's a story of a man that can only relate to the world by punching it.
Yeah.
And like outside of the ring, he may not be physically punching stuff, but he's certainly emotionally punching stuff and people.
Although he is physically punching stuff outside of the ring quite a bit.
He's also often physically punching stuff.
And also just wanting to be hit to the point where he will hit himself.
Yeah.
Just to prove that like nothing can hurt him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to like I don't know whether it would make the film better or not, or I think my issue was I was too looking for a reason to have some level of sympathy and understand at least, okay, yeah, he's a piece of shit, but I can see that he got fucked up by this thing, and like this is an explanation of like how chains of abuse work or whatever, but we never get that. So it's like he comes out of the ether as this narcissistic bastard and just continues to fail upwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny in that like it's a story about a very emotionally immature man, and the movie itself is very emotionally immature about it. It's just like, this is the way it is. This is what it is.
This is, to me, is the most like New York Film School edgelord shit. Like this is the stuff that when I was going to high school in the New York City area, going to film classes and going to film school in New York, like all the kids who idolize Scorsese, like this was the stuff that they fed off of just like really beautiful images but well crafted images, and just either garbage people or terrible situations that create those images.
Mm-hmm.
He does.
Which, I mean, it certainly appeals to. I mean, I there was a quote from Tom Waits where he says, "I love beautiful melodies telling me terrible things." That like when I was 19, I would have gotten tattooed on my chest.
Yeah.
It is like this movie was designed in a lab for film bro edgelords.
Yeah.
And it's actually interesting watching it now, more than 10 years later since the last time since I saw it in college.
Oh yeah.
And it's funny, I didn't remember a lot of this movie. I remembered the, did you fuck my wife scene?
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Which apparently, so there's a scene where it's De Niro and Pesci, and they play brothers in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Pesci is De Niro's like manager / hype man / brother.
Yeah.
And, De Niro, as the aforementioned sort of paranoia as Jake LaMotta, immediately assumes that Joe Pesci as his brother is Joey, that's his name, is fucking his wife. And they get into this screaming match where they are literally hitting each other. And it turns out they were actually hitting each other, which is not good, fight choreography protocol.
Yeah, that's terrible.
And it's a super intense scene, but I think that is kind of like King Edgelord scene, but that's the context.
It's that whole sequence of it's starting with fixing the TV to getting into the argument to him confronting his wife, and by virtue, it's the same principle as torture. It's like if you put somebody under enough stress, they'll, confess to stealing the Lindbergh baby. And that's the point that she gets to, where she's like, is this what you want to hear? Is that I admit to fucking every single person that you've ever met in your life? Fine.
Yeah.
Then if that's what you need to hear, then that's what you need to hear. And he takes that at face value and goes immediately to beat the hell out of his brother with not a second thought in front of his kids. And that's like the capsule of who this character is, at least within the confines of the film. I've never read his autobiography, so I can't necessarily speak to who he was as a person really in real life, but at least this character, that is, that's him in a nutshell.
Does this movie make you want to read the autobiography?
No, because
I want nothing. I want nothing to do with Jake LaMotta anymore. Like I'm done.
He is almost, and despite saying I wanted to avoid political shit, it's like it very much rings to me of like someone with the lack of self-awareness as a certain former president of ours, who's also has a narcissistic paranoia disorder shit going on, and just like because he keeps succeeding because of like the arena that he happens to be in, he feels like he's doing no wrong. And even I would imagine his autobiography would reflect that like he's the good guy in all of this. Of course he is. Can't you see that? And like that level of ugh, like it makes my skin crawl.
So again, there I did a bunch of sort of half-assed internet research. There's a story that says when the real Jake LaMotta saw the movie for the first time, that was the first moment that it hit him. He was like, man, I was a real prick. And he went to his ex-wife. He went to the real life Vicky. He was like, was I that bad? And she went, you were worse.
Yeah.
This movie actually paints you in a better light than you actually were. So it takes that big of a mirror for a narcissist to actually see how much damage he's doing sometimes.
Yeah. And which is why it's like I don't think I would be able to read the autobiography, because that would be written by him before he had that self-reflection. So like, and that's ultimately what gets to me tiresome with the film is we're really just seeing the same cycle occur over and over again, just in different like backgrounds and potentially with different characters. It's like he's not learning anything. It's just he's going through the same motions with every person that he meets, and even to the point where it's like he dude gets arrested and ends up in jail in a padded cell, and still comes out of it and gives his on the waterfront psych up speech at the end of the movie.
His little stand-up thing.
Yeah, it's like there is no change whatsoever.
Which it should be mentioned too, that the reason he ends up in jail is for statutory rape, essentially.
Well, because this is the other thing we didn't mention is that at least again in the world of this movie, the way that the story is portrayed, he met his second wife when she was 15 and almost
married her when she was 19.
Yeah, and almost immediately coaxed his brother into introducing the two of them, and then started sleeping with her while he was still married with his first wife, and based off of what we're seeing in the film, before she was of age.
Yeah, that is pretty well assumed.
Yeah.
The guy's a real piece of shit. The real Jake LaMotta, he only died in 2017. He lived to be 95.
I was going to say, it's like, pricks live forever. I mean, like
they really do. Like, there must be a whatever gene is associated with narcissism must also be associated with long lives, because they just keep on living.
So the other notable thing about this movie is that in the last third of the movie, De Niro puts on 60 pounds to play older Jake LaMotta, which at the time was the most weight that anybody had gained. It would go on to be surpassed by Vincent D'Onofrio in Full Metal Jacket when he put on 70 pounds. But I think that really speaks to just how all in De Niro was in this movie.
Yeah.
I think that the Oscar is probably well deserving. I have no idea who he's actually up against. Let me check on that.
I mean,
he was up against some heavy. He was up against Peter O'Toole.
Good Lord.
But I watched his acceptance speech because I was just searching around yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, he put in the work. I won't dispute that.
Yeah, I mean that also it speaks very much to the time in which this movie was made. I mean, 1980s, getting towards the end of like the new Hollywood era, but this is very much like a bunch of like artists at their height, engaging with their art in a way that is almost also art itself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, sure, you have the actors volunteer to punch each other for real because they think that's gonna be the best thing for their performance and thus the movie. But also it's also isn't maybe a little bit about how you can tell people after you've done it that we were punching each other for real? Like, is it?
Yeah.
Might it just be because you think it's cool that you're doing that?
That's the edgelord component I was talking about.
Precisely, yeah, and I guess the ways in which I have changed in the 12 years since I've watched this movie or whatever is I have gone from a little bit of respect to that to open contempt.
Yeah.
I think it's just massively irresponsible, and I mean with the punching in particular. But
Yeah.
it's also like not what the craft of acting is about.
Yeah. I mean, and the reason I fell in love with film to begin with is the magic of it. And that you could fabricate something and show it to me, and I believe that it's real. Or at least understand that it's a magic trick, but the how convincing this magic trick is. And all of that goes out the window the moment it's just like, yeah, we're just going to film two guys punching each other. Like, there are artful ways to do that. And I mean, the film culture as an art form has been doing that for over a century. Yeah. So I don't think it adds anything else to the film to have two actors physically harming each other. It's the same issue that I generally have with method acting, or directors like not telling their actors things like the thing with Die Hard with not letting Alan Rickman know when he was going to let him go. Because it's like, oh, you don't trust a professional actor to act, so you're going to just scare the shit out of him while you're filming it. Like, all of that stuff is, to me, especially these days, for the birds.
Yeah. And a lot of like the energy of this movie is kind of that. It's kind of like we're playing at this super high level, man, and the thing is this might also be one of the best films ever made.
Is it though?
Is it though?
That's the thing. That's the trouble that I'm having with this movie. Is like the thought that I had last night. This is one of the greatest movies ever made, and I hate it.
So that is kind of my question. So I've got a couple of questions that I kind of want to throw out to the group. Why is this movie a classic?
I don't know. I honestly was watching this today, and I don't know why. Like, it's not even, to me, like in the top 5 Scorsese films.
That was going to be another one of my questions is this a top 5 Scorsese
No.
film? Like, is Gangs of New York better? I mean, the first half certainly is. Is
After
The Wolf of
Hours
Wall
is
Street better? After Hours, King of Comedy, Casino, that's just off the top of my head.
For God's sake.
Yeah,
If we're going to
Goodfellas,
talk about doing a picture about somebody who's not a great person, like that's a better portrayal of that story.
That's a full arc.
Yeah.
That's an arc about somebody who thought he wanted something, got it, and got the consequences of that thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like that to me is that's the better version of this story. Well, I guess, Connor, tell me why you still think it's one of the best films ever made, because I'm curious.
Well,
I'm earnestly curious.
Yeah. And like what Peter was saying, like why do people consider it a classic? I think there's a lot of elements all together in this one soup, in this soup that mesh together in a beautiful way. Like, it's like you said, there really is not much in the way of an arc here. There's just sort of events that happen in time. and thus the movie becomes sort of a series of vignettes.
Yeah.
Which is why I think people like Zack Snyder movies so much, because that's very much what Zack Snyder movies are.
Yeah.
And the events within those vignettes are technically incredible. At least the boxing scenes are technically incredible.
Yeah.
The acting, as much as we were ragging on like the methody punch each other thing, the acting is, if nothing else, magnetic.
I think it's very good, and I think if there's somebody to blame sort of for the things that we find repulsive about sort of how the acting went about, that's on Scorsese for not putting up the appropriate guardrails or knocking off the method shit. Well, there is another story where when De Niro shows up to set 60 pounds overweight, he shut everything down because he thought that was just self-destructive behavior. He's like, what the fuck are you doing? Yeah.
Well, and I think that's just egos, and I think a lot of the problem that a lot of the problems of like the way the movie goes about getting made is ego poisoning, especially on Robert De Niro's part, because I think he saw this as an opportunity to show the world after Taxi Driver everything he could do as an artist, not even as a movie star. I think he really. It's like if Jared Leto had talent. Can you imagine what a monster he would be if Jared Leto was actually good at acting?
It depends on the movie. I have some defense of Jared Leto that don't want to get into in this.
Is it Morbin time, Peter?
It's never Morbin time.
But like and I think the things that make this movie sort of stick in people's heads are the boxing scenes.
Oh yeah.
Because they are just visually so impressive. Like the flash bulbs to the flash bulbs to the freeze frames effect is, I think, probably the first time anybody had seen something like that before.
Yeah.
The transitions from slow motion into full motion is very flashy and very, very well executed, and that's
really impressive. Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like it's so much about the way the movie is made is just so beautifully executed, and also the moments where Martin Scorsese just sort of sets down a camera and lets Robert De Niro go are cathartic.
So one of the brilliant things. So this is a 2-hour movie. There's less than 10 minutes of boxing in the movie total. One of the best boxing scenes, and not that the boxing is good, but that I think it's one of the most dramatic parts of the movie is the last fight with Sugar Ray.
Yeah,
where the last knockout punch and the blood's flying everywhere. The smartest thing that Scorsese did was he stole the shot list from Psycho from the shower scene. He literally did. This is a self-admitted thing that he's talked about, where it cuts to Sugar Ray's fist up in the sky, and then goes back, and you see the blood splash, and like that dramatic buildup, that horror movie tension is just executed really well. Because again, this isn't actually a fucking boxing movie.
Yeah,
right.
So I appreciate that, and I certainly understand the effectiveness of homage, or in this case, just rote copying shot lists. But to me, and I'm coming at this from a storytelling perspective, is that you still need something to string all of these moments together to make me care about it, and that wasn't there. Like Connor, you were talking about how the acting was magnetic. It's so, at least from my eyes now in 2022 as a 30-something-year-old man, it's so extra that it pushed it into farce for me. There are moments where I was laughing at him screaming at his wife about the steak. I was laughing during the fuck my wife sequence, like, because it's just, it doesn't read as true to me. It just reads as satire almost. And it's partially probably because Raging Bull has become such a major component of the film lexicon that it's just been overdone, like James Bond or Star Trek or whatever.
Well, and those idiosyncrasies of working class Italian Americans in New York City have become comedy in the last 40 years.
Yeah. And like having grown up in an Italian American family as second generation, like I see those. I have seen some of those moments to a degree, but not to the turned up to the 11 or 12 that I feel like this movie turned them up to. And maybe that's just because of my background and where I'm at in life and where we are in time. But I think those are the things, at least for me, that keep me from thinking. I can totally agree that this is technically visually, and it's worth looking at. But then again, I also, watching a train wreck in slow motion is intriguing to look at too. Like,
yeah. Well, and the magnetic acting that I was more talking about, and wasn't clear, was the moments where he's by himself.
And, yeah, that's fair.
But like to your point, Matt, the movie that could be a scene about Robert De Niro, just being Robert De Niro. It doesn't have to necessarily be Jake LaMotta having a breakdown in a cell.
There's a moment that might help that I immediately thought of to kind of illustrate what you're talking about, where he's in the sauna trying to cut weight.
Yeah.
It's like maybe a 20-second sequence where his trainer comes in. You see the steam from the sauna on the window, which he does a lot of really cool stuff with steam and smoke in this movie, executing on the black and white. And then he comes in to check on him, and he's like shadow boxing or jumping rope or something like in the sauna. He's like, I'm gonna cut the fucking weight or something like that. But it's just like him like trying to psych himself up. And I feel like that is one of those scenes where you just like can't look away.
Yeah. Speaking of that, this is one of the sweatiest movies ever made.
Oh yeah.
I don't think
appropriate for when we're filming.
Granted, is I don't think sweat has been better portrayed on film ever. At least my experience of sweat,
pretty
which
much.
Peter can attest is pretty intense.
There's a lot.
It's like I said, I will not dispute how visually impressive the film is. Like the most films made in the color era have the failing of like nobody knows really how to light for black and white, but there are totally moments, especially in the boxing matches and things like that, where he's playing with texture and he's playing with shadow and gradient of light, and you can tell that he's conscious of the fact that that's the strength that he's playing to with that film stock.
This is also one of the first boxing movies because it got compared to Rocky a lot, obviously. In all of the boxing sequences in Rocky, they were actually interested in the boxing, so they shot it from outside of the ring as though you would be seeing it, on television.
Yeah.
In this movie, there's a ton of sequences that happen being shot inside the ring, either from the perspective of the boxers or either up close like super up close with guys just getting pummeled, which I think is somewhat discounted as a revolutionary way to look at it.
I've actually heard Scorsese talk about this because he was saying that a lot of the times you'll block out a boxing scene and just place cameras like you would for TV and just pick your shots, and he says that's not directing. Also, the point of the boxing scenes are completely different in Rocky and in Raging Bull, because Rocky's trying to achieve something, and
Rocky is to The West Wing as Raging Bull is to House of Cards.
I was about to say Veep.
Well, yeah.
But I mean, the point of the boxing in Raging Bull seems like it's a sort of like sadomasochistic exercise, and also the one place that Jake LaMotta has any real power because he's actually a good boxer. And what else? It's go ahead.
When you chart the like emotional arc of this movie, it's a flat line.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest fault of this movie that we keep on kind of coming back to.
Matt, I was curious on your thoughts as another film student of the sound design of the boxing matches, where he throws in like lion roars and the sounds of traffic and shit.
Yeah,
that almost kind of got a laugh from me because again, it's one of those things that like 40 years ago changed the world or changed the way people thought about stuff like that, and now it's almost a trope or a cliche.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem of just the march of time having its effect on this film. I understand what he's trying to do is shock the audience in a way that they're not expecting watching a boxing match. It's kind of, but then my closest comparison to that is when they did the same fucking thing with Fire in Backdraft. And now I'm comparing Raging Bull to Backdraft. Like what kind of so there's your problem.
Yeah.
And so I think, like I said, I understood the thing at the time, but I think there are ways, talk to Ben Burt. There are ways to include weird noises into your sound design in ways that your audience registers it on a subliminal level, but it doesn't make them go, why am I hearing car horns during a boxing match? Like there are ways to do it a little bit less bonk bonk on the head than I feel like a lot of it was done here.
Yeah, fair.
I also think you could cut like 35 minutes out of the film, like lose a couple vignettes and because nothing's changing. So like you could lose a good chunk of like the first couple of rounds of like him going through matches and fights with his wife.
It feels like there's a really good short film in there.
Is like if this was a student short film, like, and it was 1 10-minute sequence, everybody'd be like, "That's really impressive." What are you going to do with an actual story? Like that's the problem.
Yeah.
And obviously, this is again, Martin Scorsese's name's going to continue to throw around a lot longer than mine, and we can definitely say that when he has a story to work with, he executes it well most of the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to your point, he has made variations on this movie. He's still making variations on this movie. I mean, Wolf of Wall Street is, I mean, I haven't seen it, but my understanding is that it's very much asshole makes bad decisions.
Yeah.
And then
just at a different level of spectacle. But he has a $500 million budget as opposed to, $10 million or whatever this got made for.
Yeah.
If you were teaching a film school class and you were working off of somebody's syllabus and they were like, we're going to talk about Raging Bull this day, what would be the one sequence that you would teach and why? For me, I kind of gave it away earlier, but it would be a side-by-side of the psycho shower scene and that last knockout punch from Sugar Ray.
I think that the moments, honestly, that stick with me the most are when he's the over-the-hill dude running his little nightclub.
Oh, the
stuff.
club. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that would be, or just you take one of the more visceral boxing matches. I think the whichever one ends with just a shot along the rope until it ends on blood.
Yeah.
Like just to be able to display, this is a very well technically crafted action sequence, essentially. And those would be the elements of this film that I would want film students to get from it, with the caveat of, but you need something to back this up with. You need to make sure that your audience cares about the people that you're showing in front of this camera.
Right.
I agree. I mean, yes. If I was going to do that and I wasn't allowed to pick a boxing scene, I would do the fight in the Copacabana.
Yeah.
Oh, with Pesci
with Pesci.
Yeah.
That is one of the. I mean, you talk about the boxing scenes being visually
compelling.
Thank you, compelling. you talk about the boxing scenes being visually compelling. Holy shit, the fight in the Copacabana is just chaos. Utter fucking chaos. And the way that Scorsese manages the chaos is probably the best part of, well, it's not the best part. It is just really excellent and and visceral and terrifying.
The other scene that's kind of like that it mirrors is I think it's the first fight at the beginning where it ends in like a riot or like one of the I think it's the first fight with Sugar Ray and the chair gets thrown.
Yeah.
And the lady gets trampled.
There's a weird element of like mass violence in the first third of the movie that gets kind of lost.
Yeah.
As the movie goes on, and I'm not sure why it's there.
I think that that comes from Scorsese's borderline contempt for boxing. I think that it's very much him trying to set the tone of this is how I view this sport. Nowhere else not even in, Rocky IV when Apollo Creed's getting the life literally beaten out of him. Do you have a shot that cuts away to just blood being thrown on the audience like it's a Gallagher skit?
Yeah.
But it's in this movie because like that's the lens that he's approaching this with.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I guess I'm thinking more of there's the riot scene after the first boxing match. There's the big fight at the dance that's going on almost in the background. Like how like that dance scene ends with like a bunch of guys getting thrown out, and it ends with Robert De Niro sort of pushing one. All throughout that scene, there's like a fracas going on in the background.
Yeah.
That's never really mentioned, and I have no idea why it's there. Unless it's to like illustrate just how violent the place that Jake LaMotta came from is.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then there's the big fight of the Copacabana, which I think those are all sort of a piece. And I'm not sure what's going on there. I was hoping you guys had insight.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is to not give the audience a moment to breathe, to give you the idea that there is always some sort of a conflict going on, which ultimately for a 2 hour and 10-minute film becomes exhausting, at least for me.
Yeah.
But that was kind of what I took from it. Is this man's life is constantly, from his perspective, a fight forever. Mm-hmm. And the only level of like pity that I have for him in that respect is that has to be so tiresome. Like I can't imagine living in that headspace. And that is the one respect with which I feel sorry for him. Doesn't change the fact that, he is portrayed as a very reprehensible person. But yeah, I that's what I had gotten from it.
So De Niro has been nominated for a Best Actor Academy Award 5 times. And this is the only one that he's won. And I was going to ask, of the other 5, so he's nominated for Taxi Driver, The Deer Hunter, Raging Bull, Awakenings, and Cape Fear. Raging Bull is now the only one of those movies that I've seen. If you've seen any others, would you have given him the award over this performance?
I don't think so.
I mean, yeah, because they're all very different performances.
They're all very different performances. I mean,
the only one that comes closest to this one, earnestly, is Cape Fear. Really,
yeah. Cape Fear is a big. I mean, he's terrifying, similarly terrifying, but that's a big, almost cartoony kind of character.
Yeah. Taxi Driver is another disturbing role, but in a different way. Awakenings, I enjoyed him in. I just don't know I don't remember enough of it. Like I would have given, well, Robin Williams is in that, isn't he? I think Robin Williams does a great job in that one. That's also one of his earlier trying to be dramatic roles. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, of those, this would be the one, I guess. The real question is, are there any other Robert De Niro roles that you think he should have been nominated and or won an Oscar for that he wasn't?
A little surprised he wasn't nominated in supporting for Goodfellas. His only supporting actor nominations were Godfather Part 2, which he won, and Silver Linings Playbook.
Heat, probably.
Oh, shit.
Heat?
Yeah, Heat.
Yeah.
I would have given him probably both him and Pacino.
Analyze this. Yeah.
We've talked a lot about De Niro. I'm interested in your thoughts on Pesci.
Oh, I love him. But that's just, I love little angry Italian men.
Reminds you of
So Pesci gets called up by Scorsese and De Niro because he had not made a film in 4 years, and he was managing an Italian restaurant in like the Bronx when this movie gets into pre-production. And this is the beginning of like the great, triumvirate that is Scorsese, De Niro, and Pesci. So I think he's great in this movie. I think this is one of his actually more subdued performances.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's up with his teeth in this movie. Is he wearing a piece for like his top teeth? They just feel like
it does look like it does look like he's wearing
I don't know,
like veneers or something. I don't know.
Speaking of another Scorsese movie, he reminds me a lot of Jonah Hill's character in Wolf of Wall Street with the teeth. Anyway, I think I really like Joe Pesci in this movie. I also really liked Kathy Moriarty, who plays Vicky, but we can talk about her in a second.
Yeah, I know. I mean, Joe Pesci's great. I didn't see The Irishman. I've heard that he potentially kind of phones it in a bit, but I will grant him that because he's like 80 now.
It's a weird performance.
Yeah, but like this is a good early setup for him, and I love the awkwardness and that he plays that last meeting he has with Jake of just it's exactly the way that you react that somebody who's been abused and runs into their abuser and their abuser's trying to like, they think that they are performing some sort of penance or whatever it is, and just like, oh, we're okay, aren't we? And he wants really not, all he wants is to get out of this situation as fast as possible. And you can see him just, radiate that. And that, I think that's one of the better parts of his performance in this.
That was really well put.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything to add to that.
Yeah, he is asked to play a lot of different. Actually, if there's one thing, Joey changes a lot from scene to scene in this movie.
Yeah.
And he like gains some confidence, and like he's in the very beginning he's like this very meek guy, and then in the middle he's this confident businessman that like knows what he's doing and is obviously smarter than Jake.
Mm-hmm. Well, and who cares about Jake, and who's trying to get him back on the straight and narrow, and in like the way that he only can is also kind of a toxic dude, and saying what the fuck is wrong with you and get your shit together and you should know better, and that's about the extent of his love. No, I thought he was I think he did a really good job.
He does a very impressive very impressive impression of Tony Shalhoub when he has that mustache.
Oh yeah.
That is a weird change at the very end, the very last scene when he's got the mustache.
Just a thing that popped in my head and I wrote it down.
Yeah. I do want to talk about Kathy Moriarty real quick because she was 19 when this movie was filmed.
Jesus.
Yeah. And she carries herself like a veteran pro.
Yeah.
I mean, she is going toe to toe with every person in this movie, like she's been doing it her whole life. Yeah. So I thought she was fantastic. I'm actually kind of shocked that we haven't seen more of her. I haven't done really a deep dive into her personal life, but it feels weird that I have not really seen any of her.
Discounting her tremendous performance in Casper?
Oh my God.
Was she in Casper?
She's the villain in Casper.
I forgot about that.
Oh man. Looks like she's in Analyze That.
Oh. I'm sure that was on purpose.
Her top 4 movies on IMDb are Raging Bull, Soap Dish, The Bounty Hunter, which is of course 2010 rom-com vehicle for Jennifer Aniston and Gerard Butler, and Analyze That.
A movie that does not exist.
Yeah, I kind of want to do a deep dive on her and see where she sort of ended up in life.
Yeah.
Because I thought she was fantastic.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it looks. I mean, just looking at her Wikipedia page, it looks like she's worked consistently. She's been in 1 or 2 things a year since 1980, pretty much. Looks like she took a break from 81 to 87.
Very strange. Yeah, but yeah, it's you. She doesn't miss a beat. You would think that she was in it for a decade by the time that she shows up in this film, and very convincingly plays someone who is stuck in a terrible relationship, but also in certain respects does not give a shit and gives as good as she gets to a degree.
Yeah.
And plays somebody who makes her decisions internally and is whip smart about it. Just her at the very end when she's telling Jake that she's divorcing him from the car, and the way it's framed is Jake is up, we're looking down on her, and she's in the car, like she's almost like contained, but she's the one with all of the power in that scene. And you can tell immediately just by her disposition the entire time. It's like, nope, this is final. I've been planning it for a while. I'm taking the kids. It's all been done. I have a lawyer. This is it.
And she only cracks the window.
Yeah.
Like she doesn't, she uses the car as like body armor, basically. Because she knows if she lets him in the car, lets him close the distance, he'll get her back either by, canoodling or punching, which is, the 2 ways that.
Yeah. Well, Jake can really
conversely,
the scene where the first time she's packing her things and getting ready to leave, and he keeps like loving up on her and everything. All of that is skin crawling, but it is a great performance.
Yeah.
So she did a great job in this film. Of all the characters, it's her and Joe Pesci that I feel the most for. Joe Pesci's just a little bit too much of a dick to his wife and kids, though. So she takes she's in the number 1 slot.
Yeah, Pesci, while he has an arc, is still not a great guy.
No.
I think by the end he might be a better guy, but he's not a great guy.
No, he just doesn't cause as much actual damage as Jake LaMotta. I mean, that's kind of the thing. It's like, we don't see a moment where Joe Pesci hits his wife.
No. He's a lot of talk. This is not to say that verbal abuse is any better than physical abuse.
True. True.
But
it's also it's like we're like the culture that these guys come from would, not only would breed guys like Jake LaMotta, but like would reward guys like Jake LaMotta because, in a world where everybody bigger than you might hurt you in some way, becoming a sort of violent animal,
which is
a raging bull, if you will, is the only can be the only way to protect yourself. Which is not excusing anything.
Well, and that's the thing, because it's such a weird thing, because conversely, and maybe this is in my mind between Raging Bull, but also I've been thinking about grandpas recently, but my grandfather was off the boat Italian, raised in the Bronx about 10 years before Jake LaMotta, on Jerome Avenue by Yankee Stadium, and didn't speak a lick of English and had the piss beaten out of him consistently because he couldn't speak English, and was one of the most, at least by the time that I got to know him, kind and giving, like open people, at least as far as a person from his generation could be. And like my mother, like she would always have fights and conflicts from him, but like in any story she ever told me, he was never, physically abusive or verbally he was never that kind of guy that we see in this movie. So it's so strange, or it's an interesting contrast for me to see the crucible of growing up an Italian American in the Bronx, producing two very different people or types of people.
Yeah.
And you almost wish that you had that contrast in this movie.
Yeah.
To be like, there were guys that got the piss beat out of them and either couldn't fight back or chose not to fight back and wound up being better people as a result of it.
Yeah. And it's like, and I think that's what I know that people take from this movie, especially like, again, I grew up in the New York area with a lot of Italian American kids and Italian American film student kids. And the ones that looked at this movie and were like, yeah, man, like the Bronx, it made you tough. And it's like, it's that toxic masculinity angle that I think is dangerous because it's a fallacy, because it doesn't just produce that. And my grandfather would be one of the examples of that. So I think, that's one of the things that I feel is a little dangerous is too strong of a word, but disingenuous, at least from my perspective.
Right. Yeah.
And again, I think, back at the top of this conversation, that's the exact thing that, film bros take from a lot of Scorsese's movies, where that's the point is it's a warning sign to not be that person, as opposed to
it's not an instruction manual. Yeah, it's not an instruction manual.
It's a warning, right?
Right. Well, and also you bringing that up made me think about the ending and like, what does it actually cost Jake LaMotta to be a monster? Kind of being a little bit pathetic, not really knowing what to do with himself after his boxing career is over. That's kind of that's it.
He's living comfortably, like he doesn't. I mean, he's overweight, but that just means that he's eating well. And like he's
and if the movie had ended in the jail cell, that's a lot different than him rehearsing his speech again, getting ready to go back out on stage.
Yeah, but it also wouldn't be true to life because Jake LaMotta was at the fucking Academy Awards.
Yeah.
When that in 1981, I guess.
Yeah.
So like things. I mean, Jake LaMotta in real life, bad guy. Things worked out pretty okay.
Lived a long, fruitful life.
Yeah.
At least for him.
Again, 95.
Jesus Christ. Only the good die young.
After being a boxer,
right?
Too.
Yeah, that's the thing. The amount of abuse that you put your body through. And I don't know that it's explicit, but it feels like there are probably some drugs in there. Obviously, a lot of
at least
booze.
Alcohol abuse, yeah.
Yeah. Like it's, I don't know. Maybe there's, after the movie ends, he, gets on Atkins or something and straightens out. But like, I don't feel like it's likely.
And also, like, he was known for being one of the strongest chins in boxing at the time.
Yeah.
Like, he took a lot of punishment and he took it all to his head.
And there, I mean, you could argue that there is some sort of like a genetic freak component of just like his skull was built the right way to sustain that type of consistent damage and not melt his brain. Because obviously, like, he lived to be 95, but at least had control of most of his faculties in the 80s when he was already, pushing, 60?
Yeah. Well, and, we know a lot more about how the brain works now. I mean, if this movie would be made now, it would probably be like a CTE drama about a guy with brain damage and impulse control problems.
Well, I mean, and conversely, like, Muhammad Ali had Parkinson's. Like, it's a mixed bag of what you end up with. But yeah, it's which is, again, it's just which is why I'm reticent to say that this is one of the greatest films ever made. People can gush over it, and I will not dispute that it's not technically well made, but I don't think the themes of the movie are necessarily clear. And I don't think that there's enough of a strong through line for our subject to really merit it. Because in order for me, if it's going to be a great film, all of the cylinders have to be firing, and this one doesn't have the story beat one going. So I think that can, at least in my playbook, that's a major mark against you.
I think I agree. And I think the thing that we can all three end on this and agree that Frank probably loves this movie and it's his number one favorite. And he's out there somewhere listening to this right now just seething that we didn't actually get it. I really enjoyed this conversation. I love going through and going back through these movies that I certainly should have seen at some point in my life and sort of breaking them down with you guys. And I can't wait for the next one.
Well, thank you for inviting us on this adventure with you. So far, I've rewatched 2 movies that I haven't seen since college and have really enjoyed my sort of more mature take on them.
Yeah.
So
no, I'm
look at you putting some good in the world.
I do promise that the next one that I pick will not be so much of a downer. At least I hope not.
Yeah, it keeps going back to like me having to pick a real weird left field palate cleanser every time, just to give us a break.
Exactly. All right. Until next time, we have given no flicks.
Oh, Jesus.
Still working on it.
The boo box. The boo box.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, remember to like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram at NoFlicksGivenPodcast. See you next time.